broadcasting from Texas today, but next week we should be in Nebraska because we're hitting the road on Monday. We're gonna drive on up to Omaha and see the relatives and spend a couple weeks up there helping take care of the grandbaby. So who knows? Next time you see us, who knows where we'll be? Somewhere in Nebraska.
Preferably Omaha.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So you're waiting for me to do
That's
my
it.
turn.
Yeah.
You didn't go like, it's your turn now.
It's your turn now.
Okay. Well, I was able to pick up on that little yeah. So I was looking for a story to share to illustrate something to talk about today. And I was finding nothing in my own life. And so my sister told me a story this last week that I thought I would share. And okay, so she had a friend who was and did now moved to California, and she had 3 kids, and she also had a dog and 2 cats. But now she had to move. She didn't have a car, so she's going to have to take the airplane. So they packed up what was most important to them in whatever amount of suitcases that they could get onto the airplane. And then she did buy a crate for the dog, but she had asked my sister to watch the 2 cats until she could afford to get them crates and have them shipped out. So my sister agreed to that. She already has 1 cat and she does like animals, and she's always willing to help someone out when someone really needs help like that. And she didn't want to see the pets go to the pound. So they loaded the car up, I think it was on Thursday or so, and she was driving down the airport. The road's a mess with traffic and just really backed up, and so she gets off, takes all these back roads to the airport, but they still end up late, and now the woman, her flight she has to get on the next flight instead. So, but in the meantime, while they're getting checked in, they're trying to get the dog into the crate that they bought. Now, the dog doesn't really look very big, so I don't know how small the crate was, but somehow or other the crate was too small. And so there wasn't nothing else to happen except my sister agreed to take the dog home with her until, of course, the woman can get a job and pay to have the dog shipped out there. So let's see, what else happened? Oh yeah, and then she needed to stop by the woman's apartment on the way home and pick up the 2 cats that she had left. It literally took her 40 minutes of chasing around the apartment to get the cats, because they'd hide here or there, and there was an upstairs and a downstairs, and that was kind of a mess. And then on the way back from the airport, she puts her address into the GPS, right? But somehow or other, she's headed towards Fort Collins. It took her to Boulder. I don't know how that sort of stuff happens, but sometimes it does with GPS. Just it reroutes you somehow or other, and yeah. So that was one of those interesting situations in life that can be frustrating to say the least. And you kind of got to wonder why they happen. And it's one of those things that isn't even finished yet. I mean, how long is it going to be before the woman can afford to have her animals shipped out there? And then, of course, my sister will have to buy the crates and crate them up and get them on down to the airport and such stuff like that. So anyways, like I said, we can't predict that kind of stuff. You could have made up that kind of story. Well, this is what my day is going to be like today. You wouldn't even write that for yourself. You wouldn't even want it to happen. Well, but things like that do happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're telling that like she got rerouted by GPS. It was just making me think of, I know I've told this story on Salt before, but it's probably been a while. Before the days of GPS, when I was first learning to drive, I lived at boarding school in Asheville, North Carolina, and my home was in Columbia, South Carolina, which is like a 2-hour drive. And I had, driven around in town and city and stuff. I've never actually done the drive, though, from Pisgah to my house, which is mostly interstate. So this was really my first time driving on the interstate, which, now you think nothing. You don't even think about it. But it was a little intrepidous back then because I'm like, I've never done this. And so when I got going, I don't know. I probably wasn't into it. Maybe an hour and 15 minutes or so. And this sounds weird now, but at the time I was just freaking out because I didn't recognize anything. I was like, I mean, in your head, it's supposed to be Highway 40 to Highway 26 to Columbia, and I did 40, I did 26, but it's the first time ever doing it, and I did everything was nothing said South Carolina, and there was no GPS. I didn't really have a map with me, and I'm just started to freak out, and so the first sign I saw that said South Carolina, I took that because I thought, well, at least I'm going to South Carolina, and it was for Greenville, South Carolina. And anyway, long story short, 5 hours later, I ended up in Columbia because instead of going Asheville straight down into Columbia, I ended up going Asheville down to Atlanta, Georgia, and then up to Columbia, which did have signs for South Carolina and Columbia all the way, but it was a 3 hour detour that was unnecessary. So that wasn't GPS's fault. That was my own fault of, you know, a novice driver. I never made that mistake again, but that was quite the detour of a lesson.
Did you have another story you were going to tell?
I mean, I can. I mean, that's going to be between those two. I mean,
Oh,
that was isn't. I mean, the lesson was later. Like I can tell the story now. The thing that did for me though was once I went through it again, um, I learned not to freak out on the highway. I learned that highways work that way. That they don't always say they don't know where you're going, so they're not going to have signs for your exit when you want them. You need to know the route and trust the route and trust the map that you looked at before you left or that you have with you and not give in to fear. So, and that actually played out. There were several times where even later, I would like get a little worried and nervous, like, oh man, am I heading the right direction? And I would just have to tell myself, you 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 routed it before you left. Don't freak out. Keep on the path. Keep going. And it just taught me not to give in to fear on the highway while I was driving, which ended up serving me well. But I
yes.
didn't know that at the time.
No, right, yeah. And it reminds me of, oh, I mean, it's well over 10 years ago that I read through the book Humility by Andrew Murray. And I highly recommend that book to anybody. Um, and and so I read through it when I started reading that book. I read through it like 7 times in a row, and it didn't take me more than, I don't know, a couple months to do that. And granted, it wasn't a particularly big book, but all the same. And I highlighted and I underlined and I highlighted and I underlined. Sometimes highlighting and underlining the same thing and such, and so um, eventually, over the course of the years, after about 7 times, I was like, okay, it's time to give the book a rest for a little while. But I still pick it up occasionally, and will highlight and underline something. And the thing is, after quite a while of doing that, eventually there's most everything in the book actually gets highlighted and underlined. But there was a few pages here and there that were still white, and so the sporadic paragraph throughout the book that still was white. And so I thought, well, you know what? It's a really great book with a lot of depth in it, but um, every book has to have a little bit of filler, right? Just a little bit of fluff stuff to take up space, and that's just how it is. But finally, after a while, I thought, you know what? What if those white spots aren't just fluff? What if they are the part that has more depth than I understand at the moment? And so every now and again, I would pick it up and I would read some of those white spots just to see if that was true. And eventually, I remember the first time especially that I was like, oh, I get this, it's true. It has more depth. It's not just fluff. It has more depth than I understood in the past. And so there I got my pen and I underlined that. And so really sometimes when we're going through this crazy stuff, and like Brett in particular, and my sister's story isn't even done yet. So, there's no doubt something that she'll learn from that. But in the meantime, Brett learned from that, and sometimes we're looking in the wrong place. I mean, Brett was looking at the fear instead of what he later learned, but it took time in order to learn that, time and experience. And that's how our relationship with God goes. It's time and experience and time spent with stuff, and sometimes, honestly, I don't even realize I've learned something, that I've understand stuff more until I go and, like, say, read that book or parts of the book again, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, I get it in a whole new way now. So it's only God that can come along and change that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess if you break it down to a nugget, it's, there might be things we're going through life right now that don't make sense, but if we don't give in to fear, especially if we choose to act and react and everything with love, eventually things will make sense. History has a way of, as we live past things, we can look back and go, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's what I got from that. Oh, that taught me this. So sometimes things don't make sense in the moment, but later they will. Most of the time, not all the time.
Right, not
There are a
all
few
the time.
things,
And
but
sometimes just because it might appear to be a bad situation, we can learn from that as well.
yeah. Yep. All right. Well, I guess that was it.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good Sabbath, and we'll see you next time.